Thank you very much for coming to this extraordinary event of the Insta Live that Acosphere are offering you every week. We're very delighted to have our speaker today that I'm going to introduce first. Let me just check that it is the time. Yes, it is. I'm going to leave them a minute before we get started. I tend to be very much on time, and I'm going to leave just a minute so people can come. I see that a lot of people are just gathering. So welcome everyone, and we're going to get started in just now. So let me introduce you first, Karen. So Karen Williams is a producer and an on-camera host who is equally at home working in front of or behind the camera. With an extensive background in film production, acting, social advocacy, healthcare administration, and integrative healing therapy, Karen lends her multi-platform expertise to rebranding aging. Through public conversations, she illuminates the ways in which people over 40 are living and thrives at disrupting the fear-based association with life's most natural process. And she seeks to highlight how society can best facilitate what she calls empowering aging. Returning to modeling after an almost 3-decade hiatus, Karen has been named, listen to this, Generation Next by Vogue magazine, with a client list that includes such big names as Estée Lauder, Aileen Fisher, Macy's, to just name a few. Her acting career encompasses numerous daytime and primetime TV shows and TV ad campaigns in the US. With a degree from Brown University, a bachelor's degree, and a master's degree from the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies, Karen is a delightful guest to have today. So welcome, Karen, and thank you for accepting to be on the Insta Live of Acosphere. How are you? Good.
Thank you.
Good.
I'm well, thank you. I'm very
excellent. So we're having a few ins and outs with the sound, which will let me just
give you. I'm going to put headphones on. That will
okay,
help.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead. Yeah, it's really a pleasure to have you here, and welcome everybody. And we're going to get started as soon as Karen is comfortable. That's quite all right.
That might be better. I'll have to handhold the.
Yeah.
The
Can you hear me well, though?
Can
you hear me well?
Just bear with me.
Yeah, sure. Karen, can you hear me well?
Okay. Gilles, is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Much better.
Okay,
Thank you.
good.
Can you hear me well?
Yes,
yeah,
perfectly
excellent,
clear.
Excellent. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. Let's get started right away. So, Karen, what makes you an international public speaker? This is a phase, something in your life and in your experience that I haven't highlighted, but what makes you an international public speaker? Where do you get the confidence that you have to stand there and speak? And how do you command attention?
That's a multi-layered question. I think that connecting to people around the globe is a skill that is acquired perhaps, but it also comes from a comfort with self and an ease and a rootedness in who one is. And I have worked a lot of years, Gilles, in different ways. Even listening when someone recites my bio, it's almost as if I can become a third-party observer of my own life. And I have traversed different industries and I've acquired an incredible skill set, if you will, and adaptability. But the thread throughout is I'm very anchored in who I am. And I'm coming from a place not only from that groundedness, but also from authenticity. You know, I speak to every single person I speak to, whether it's one person or 1,000 people, from the same place, and that's from my heart. And I try to be as transparent, as honest, as clear as possible. And the groundedness coupled with the transparency and the heart-centered approach to interaction, I believe, is what translates to people. And even when I don't speak the language, it's amazing. There is something about one's body, heart, soul, when they're all connected, when you integrate that, and when you're communicating from that place of centeredness and love, really, it's incredible how the response is. And I suspect that that's how I've been able to traverse different industries, but also around the world.
Amazing. And you know, you may remember how we met, and you know, we
Yes.
spoke for 7 hours in a row, and we became friends and stayed friends ever since. But I was very impressed by how posed you were as a public speaker, and how calm and serene you were, just like today. You have lots of presence. I've seen a comment or two speaking about your great presence when you speak to people. So, you know, this is a talent in itself, and you work on it, as you said.
And Gilles, you know something, I wonder if it's worked on, or if it's, if we spent more time nurturing our soul's greatest yearnings, you know, and connect to that, find ways of connecting to our truth. It's unique for everyone. I actually believe that more people will end up seeing us. So
Yeah.
that's a really, you know, sort of seeing you, I see you. What does that mean? It
Yeah.
means that I feel you. You
Yes.
register and resonate in my heart and my soul. And so that instead of spending all this time on our superficial self, we need to then cultivate our inner lives and our inner soul and nurture that. And for every person, as I said, that's different. And I believe that that's part of the healing that we actually need to go through as a world at this particular time in our history.
It's interesting because knowing you, I've experienced that. So you stay yourself all the time, but sometimes you just raise and you connect with the person that is in front of you, staying yourself at all times, and that's quite a skill, I think. So let me ask you another question. So you are an experienced model, actress, film producer, to name just a few of your skills. What's your story, Karen?
You know, Gilles, like many people, there is no singular story, especially for me. I'm 54 years old. And so my life has been the process of reinvention, you know, and adaptation. So my story, like everyone else's story, is complex and multifaceted. But the underlying part of that is that I was able to, first of all, I had an incredibly strong foundation, and I cannot, you know, attribute that to anything other than my parents. My parents were exemplary for me in terms of the ability and the confidence they gave me to be in the world as a global citizen, as someone who understood enough that she needed to be humble, work incredibly hard, but they nurtured my curiosity. So they had the expectation of my excellence, right? And I remember my father would say, you know, Karen, I wouldn't be upset at you if I knew that you tried your best. And even if you didn't do well, you know, in terms of everyone else's measure, if you tried your best, I would be okay. And so that was always the implicit understanding. I just needed to try my best. And so I've taken that in all the different avenues that I have worked and inhabited. And I think that my story then, there's a thread towards it. There's a curiosity. There's a comfort with being uncomfortable. And there is also a respect for other people and a respect for just showing up and doing hard work.
Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. So solid foundation and really high standards, whatever you do, wherever you are. Could you kindly share with us any anecdotes related to the challenges you've faced in building your career?
Yes, what comes to mind is, you know, most people are more linear, much more linear than I've been. So 1 + 1 = 2, or A, B, C, and it's sort of, you know, very easy to track that.
Yeah.
I haven't had that linear sort of experience. And I was okay with, you know, the multifacetedness of my life and who I was. It was often challenging to communicate my complexities to other people, because I think it's sort of human nature to slot people into categories. Oh, so you're this, or you're this, or you're that. And I inhabited different boxes. And so the challenge was always to say, no, 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 I'm fine. I'm good. I'm right for your box. But why not then, you know, invite other aspects of other experiences or other boxes to that? And oftentimes people weren't prepared for that. Yeah. So that, you know, very specifically when I was acting, you know, this is before I started to do production. I was actually, no, it was after I started to do production, because I started production before I was acting. You know, they would say to me, the casting is that way. Or you know, when I was a producer, they would say the casting is that way. When I was acting, they would say you're thinking too much. When I was modeling, I remember a photographer saying to me when I was very young, because I took a long gap when I was modeling, almost 30 years, as you said. Yeah. And when I first started out, you know, I would want to communicate all these things with my voice, and you don't have a voice at that time. And they didn't understand that I was in university and then graduate school, and I was only doing it part-time. They wanted me to fit into the box of what just being a model is, and they had a very one-dimensional idea of that. So, yeah. So in sort of the summary of that is that the one-dimensionality view with which so many people see others is one of the consistent challenges that I've faced in all the different, you know, industries that I've worked.
Get it. So yeah, moving people's perception and just staying yourself, and that one-dimensional view, being able to break it up in any industry you've worked in. That's what I keep from this conversation. So how did Generation Next Top Model appellation, you know, naming you came about? That's one question. And I'm going to ask you a couple of follow-on questions on that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I'm listening. Right. I'm listening.
So what advice would you give to younger designers who might be listening to this particular conversation? And I think I've seen one or two, as a matter of fact.
Okay, so first of all, Generation Next was something that Vogue named, not just me, but Coco Mitchell, and another, you know, you can see it. It's in Vogue's April 2020 issue. And I think what probably why they approached me, first of all, Coco Mitchell is phenomenal, and anyone on Instagram, you should follow her. She's a beautiful African-American woman who has been doing this for the longest time. And she is I believe, in her early 60s. And what's significant about that is that, and the other woman's name is Roxanne Gould, who's an American woman. And what's interesting about Coco's story is that she started as a school teacher, and she then met Eileen Ford and then started to model. And she's been able to, you know, have a sustaining career for all these decades. That's unusual in an industry that is so youth-centric, and in a society that's so youth-centric. And when I returned to modeling at age 52, 2 years ago, I was hell-bent on representation of women of color in the category of, you know, of whether they call them silver or mature women or something like that. Because what I was seeing was the demographic shifts throughout the globe. There are more people over 65 years old. That's the growing population, the fastest growing population around the globe. And they're also choosing to age in place, to work longer. For the most part, they're healthier than any other generations, because there's a few generations in that have ever been. Yeah. And the implications of those things in the workplace are significant. But what's also important, from a marketing, from a consumer perspective, those are the ones with the most amount of money, right? And I'm going to even take it back from 50 and over. 50 and over, we have more spending power than the 20s or the 30s and the 40s, when they're building their careers and families and whatnot. And the disconnect, Gilles, is I don't see enough people in fashion appreciating that, catering to that, and also keeping up with the progress that we have made in terms of redefining what it is to age. You know, there was a time when 65 people would retire. Now we have people working till they're 90, 95 years old. I mean, really working. And we have to find a way to for all economies and all sectors to embrace the different generations who are within the workplace, but as people who create products, whether they be designers or anyone in fashion and beauty, let's just say, they have to start shifting away from the deficit model with aging and understand that beauty style doesn't have an age bracket. Yeah. Right? It's ageless. And so we need representation in its truest manifestation. When I was modeling when I was younger, I was part of a whole group of Black models who fought for darker skin models, who fought for models who are full figured. And it took so many years to get there. Well, now the fight is for more inclusion in terms of not just race and culture and ethnicity and gender, but also age. It's often the most overlooked in all categories. So designers, if you're listening, why aren't you featuring women who are over 50 years old when they can afford your style? Why do we have to look and see our daughters who are beautiful, or our, our nieces? Why does it always have to be a 20 or 30 or 40-year-old? Why can't it be older women? An 80-year-old? Beauty is beauty, style is style. And that's my message.
Yeah, it's after a certain age, and particularly the 50 and more, something happened here. Can you see me?
I can't see you, but I...
Okay, let's see. Let me just check here. Live, let me just go back. Everybody please stay. Okay, here we go. So it's, after a certain age that we have more power of purchasing, and you're actually not being courted by the designers, the younger designers. So there's really a very interesting dynamic to maybe shift around the world on this, and Generation Next will make it happen with you and the others that you've mentioned. So,
but I have to say something, Gilles, before we move on.
Sure.
It's not only Generation Next. We need the ingenuity and the energy of younger generations. Yes. We need to have intergenerational exchanges, not just in fashion and beauty, but across industries. There is something about what is happening now. We have ageism on both sides of the equation. The older folks need to embrace the younger folks and their savvy, their skills, their technology skills. And then we need to, those of us who are in our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, we need to then have opportunities then to exchange and share so that we're mutually building. Yeah. That's really important.
Got it. Building together, mutually building is really what where the magic happens. How can someone with your career in fashion and film industry manage innovation by going out to a hospital kind of environment and creating that business? And what challenges did that represent? I know you went into a hospital administration particularly and healing. Tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you had there.
Well, first of all, the healing work I do, the integrative healing, has always been my go-to in terms of, I believe in wellness from the inside out. And I want to focus with my life on, preserving vitality and health and from a wellness perspective. And so that when I need doctors and medicine, I go there. So it was my own curiosity that helped to lead that whole, dive into the integrative world. I ran a very large cardiology practice of over 2,500 patients. Wow. And it was an unexpected opportunity. I don't think of it as a challenge. And this is important for people. We need to sometimes reframe the conversation, even in our head. When there's a challenge, how can that actually present as an opportunity? Because I find my greatest growth actually happens when I'm being challenged, when I'm being uncomfortable, And so I was completely in waters that I had never traversed before. But I thought to myself, you're a producer. You know how to assemble a crew. You know how to organize. You know how to, and I thought about all of my skill sets that producing required. And I literally transferred that into healthcare. There was a staff, there were patients, just like I would have people on, on a set. And then the creativity, the ingenuity that I had certainly developed through acting and even producing, I was able to take that into healthcare and really focus on messaging, you know, because there is a messaging gap in healthcare.
Yeah.
Look at what happened with the coronavirus. We saw a disproportionate impact on people of color, especially Black folks, certainly in the United States.
Yeah.
And you know, we know now, if we knew, but you and I knew before, but we know now, understand that the underlying condition is racism. That's a pandemic, and that affects everything, and systemic and structural issues. And also, you know, but who was messaging about the coronavirus? We rarely saw people who looked like the communities that were being impacted the most. And so when I was in healthcare, I made sure that I knew how to message to the communities of color. And not that we didn't have patients of all colors, but I understood the disproportionate, you know, health inequities, and we needed to target communities of color. And so I was able to transfer skills very, very seamlessly, actually. And that's something that for people who have to or want to change careers, sometimes you need to step back and say, what are the skills that I have? And how can I appropriate those skills in other industries? And there's where the opportunities present themselves as opposed to the challenges.
Yeah, so we focus on the opportunities, and you really assessed your set of skills and what are the skills that are transferable that you could use to your advantage. Fantastic. I want to take a minute just to acknowledge all the people who are coming in and making some comments. Thank you so much, everyone. We also have had a surprise visit of Philip Noyce. I don't know if you know Philip Noyce. He did films like The Bone Collector.
Yes.
And we also have, obviously, two of the former people that we've interviewed. So thank you. Much love to all of you guys. And, you know, it's just a pleasure to have this interview with you, Karen. On to my next question. You know, how do you keep a team on top of innovation constantly when you have to work with a crew on a film set or in the various environments in which you've worked?
First of all, Philip Noss, you know, thank you here for being here. My films aren't his films. I work on advocacy and documentaries and things like that. Innovation is not my responsibility only. It's a crew, right? So they're going to come with their skill set, and they're going to introduce me to the newest and the latest and the greatest in terms of technology within their own departments. So it's actually, how do I keep up? How do I open myself to learn all those things, or even open myself to not be afraid of learning? Because technology can be daunting. You know, first it's AR, VR, and then there's AR, and then there's something else, and it just keeps on developing and developing. And that's why it's really incumbent on all of us, especially as we age, to not be afraid of technology. And I also want to task younger generations to, you know, think of ways that technology can be used to bridge the gap of communication between generations, and think of ways that it can allow this wonderful period of reset. You know, all this upheaval has to come to something, and it's an opportunity for reset. How can technology be used in a way that it helps to bridge the divide, the gaps that we have economically, socially, systemically? Because there's opportunity that. So innovation, all the different departments on a film set have their own different ideas about innovation. And my responsibility is to be open to that, and to also not be fearful of it, so that I can actually learn something from it.
So your openness and being able to learn from your crew, so that, you know, the innovation can flow. Fantastic. You worked on a short film covering Black doctors, specifically about the COVID-19. What's the gist of it, and why did you do it?
Well, first of all, it was because I was in New York City. I was locked in, you know, quarantined in New York City during the height of the coronavirus here. And I felt helpless, Jill. I kept on hearing you know, every 5 minutes I would hear sirens going off. I live alone and I was alone. And I immediately knew that there would be a disproportionate impact on, you know, poor people. So that means for us here, people of color, and a lot of them are African American immigrants, you know, Latinx. And so I knew I needed to do something. I come from a family of doctors.
Yeah.
I have lots of doctors who are friends. And I thought, okay, this again, technology, right? You have your Zoom, you have a computer, you have your phone, get on the phone and just start calling people. Yeah. And so I gathered 4 doctors on Zoom from different specialties, choosing the specialties that seemed to speak to what was going on. And I asked them questions that I would want to know if I was someone who was vulnerable to coronavirus, and how, you know, I wanted them to give advice in terms of what we can do to either lessen the impact, or what we can do, even practically speaking, if we had symptoms, what are the best steps to take? And this is the whole thing. I wanted to create messaging from people who look like the communities that were being impacted the most. And that's what Black Doctors and COVID-19 is. And that was the impetus for it.
Fantastic. Thank you for doing that. I really enjoyed that film. And if you who are listening to us have a chance, go onto Karen's pages, and particularly on her YouTube page, and look at it, watch it. In the face of the current discussion around race, diversity, and inclusion, what are some of your insights?
You know, this is our moment to get it right.
Yeah.
And people have to be willing to be uncomfortable. You know, the French expression, I said it to you once before, je suis très inquiète. There's no literal translation in English, but it's only when we are unquiet in our minds that we will actually, and uncomfortable in our bodies, that change is going to be possible. And so I say that we cannot be fearful of uncomfortable conversations, and we cannot, and also there may be a little chaos in order for change to happen. And instead of focusing on, oh my goodness, this is horrible, and how long I'm going to be locked up for, and, you know, and all the violence and this, understand that for all of my life, this has been the conversation that my parents fought for. And I don't want children who could be my children, I don't have kids, to have to fight for the same things when now is our time. And for people who don't live in the United States, I would encourage them to use this opportunity to also highlight issues that are happening in their own country, because racism is rampant. We all have implicit and explicit bias, even amongst communities of color. There's always bias. And now is our time to be honest about ourselves and really take a hard look at what we can do on an individual basis to change not just the conversation, but the outcome.
Lots of great insight. Thank you for that. It's really a subject that's very touchy. And we really need to take time to understand the issues community-wise and around the world, and really just try to be just one human race, be together. So Karen, what tips about public speaking, the fashion industry, the film industry, or entrepreneurship could you give to our audience, almost as a conclusion?
Well, I'm going to focus on public speaking because I think that if you focus on being able to communicate, then you can transfer that into every single industry or conversation or communication interaction that you have. And it sounds very simple, but Gilles, I always encourage people to look someone in the eye. Just give them eye contact. I cannot tell you how few people actually look at someone's eyes when they're talking. And the other simple tip, breathe. Breathe. You know, if you're nervous, before you get angry and react, breathe. When you're going to say something, instead of speaking up from here, if you take a really deep breath, you're going to start speaking from your belly instead. And it's a stronger, more confident person who does that. be aware of your posture. You know, if you're sitting, sit up with your shoulders back and straighten your spine if you can. And if you can't, then you lean back, you get a cushion, and you prop yourself up so that you're supported. Because it's a funny thing, even the very act of shifting from this to that, it makes you feel more confident, and then you will communicate that.
Karen, yep, sorry.
No, those are simple, right? It's totally, look me in the eye, breathe, and sit up or stand up. And when you're standing up, make sure that your weight is evenly distributed, right? And so you're not shifting. And again, just if you do those three things, honestly, you will be a better communicator, which is what a public speaker is.
I know you've trained people on sets, you've trained people in the public domain, in the corporate domain on public speaking. You're a great speaker, and you have a lot of energy and very great impact. I think we might invite you again in a few months' time and do a special just on public speaking, because there's so much that you can share with the public. Karen, I want to thank you so very much for taking time to be with us today and giving all these tips to the public. I want to thank everybody who has been attending, and particularly Valerie Mason-Cunningham and Olivier Njomfar, who were previous people who were on this Insta Live and giving lots of different tips also on the same subject and on their lives. So thank you so much, Karen. Do you have a few concluding words or tips?
Honestly, I think that if we can just see each other and, you know, be honest with ourselves and come from a place of truth and authenticity and transparency, oh, Gilles, we may even help to solve the problems of the world.
Indeed.
Merci,
indeed.
merci bien.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci à toi.
Merci à toi. See you soon, Karen, and
Okay.
take care. And thanks
Bye-bye.
again for today. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.